Just no level of spin zone that can defend that one. No.
You are Locked On Spartans, your daily podcast on the Michigan State Spartans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Spartan friends, Spartan family, Locked On Spartans listeners, Indiana fans, Purdue fans, Michigan fans, I don't care who you are, where you're from. Welcome, though, to Locked On Spartans, your team in green and white 5 days a week. Please rate, review, subscribe. If you are a new listener, first-time listener, watch on YouTube. Yeah, I don't always have an ironing board and a fire extinguisher and an iron behind me. I'm still at a wonderful hotel, and it's been a great trip for yours truly. Until this unfolded, Peacock at 9 p.m. sharp, and Michigan State takes the worst loss they've had this season. Now, luckily, there haven't been a lot of these losses for our Spartans. This is just the 5th one, and if we could just make this about this show, myself for a hot second here, I think we've been incredibly fair with this team the entire season, right? Even the 4 losses previous to this, we haven't pulled our hair out. We haven't called anyone names. We haven't panicked. We've been very measured. Yes, there have been some concerning things, but hey, you know what? In the grand scheme of things, this is a team that at one point had a 13-game win streak. All right, they were sitting at the top of the Big Ten. It was a hearken to the old age of Tom Izzo basketball. No measured mat today, though. No, because if your emotions after that one are anything other than just disappointment, letdown, disgust, I'm sorry to call you a name, but that's loser behavior. You are just a loser if you are satisfied or at least not irritated or not alarmed with anything that you just saw in that game. Now, that's probably the only name I'm going to call here. Again, we're not going to just bash the players, say, oh, they didn't try hard enough, because I think even more concerningly, no, I think that is just the team. Unfortunately, their warts were magnified times 20 in this game against Indiana. But look, it doesn't take away that it is as disgraceful of a loss as it is concerning and alarming. And for the disgraceful aspect, I mean, never mind that Tom Izzo is going for history, right? Breaking Bob Knight's record, of course, for the most Big Ten wins of all time. I mean, never mind that Michigan State is 12-point favorites going into this one against a team that is not even within view of the bubble. Never mind this game being at home. But it's the fact of what you're playing for and what they are playing for. You are still in this Big Ten title chase, right? Okay? On the other bench is a team full of cream and crimson corpses that is coached by a man that is fired. A guy that literally does not have a job, that has nothing to coach for, coaching players that have almost nothing to play for, just did that to you and kind of dashed your whole Big Ten title dreams right there. I mean, we'll talk about it later in this segment. If you just want to go into Candyland and say, oh, no, we can still win the Big Ten. No, when you lose at home as 12-point favorites, that kind of puts a damper on some things. Let's talk about why this was alarming, right? Because, again, this was embarrassing, disgraceful, horrible, whatever word you want to use. I think you also have to marry that with just concern. Like, I know that we are more than halfway into the season, more than halfway into the season, but we're seeing what can unfold this team here, even with the large sample size we had in front of it. Okay, well, now there are some recent concerns, and you could take it from the West Coast trip. You could take it in the first half of the Oregon game, too. Yes, they had a great second-half comeback thanks to Jace Richardson, but there are the warts of this team, right? Like Indiana, on the flight over, or the bus ride over, all they had to do was just come up with a zone defense. I don't even know if they ran it in practice. They probably just ran it on a clipboard. It wasn't even that great of one, but it was enough to completely unfold your team because, well, there's a few things at hand here. Michigan State, they are a 3-point shooting team that is atrocious. We are well into the season enough to know that the sample size is big enough, okay? So Michigan State, at the time of recording, because, guys, I'm going to shoot you straight, the game's still going on right now. 4 of 21. There's just over a minute left. I wanted to get this early so I can get this episode out as soon as I could, because who wouldn't want to join this party? But the 3-point shooting has been whack, for lack of a better term, all season, okay? And you also saw the front court, once again. Yeah, that could be what undoes this team too. And yes, I don't take back anything we said earlier this season when we talk about the growth that they've shown. Okay, especially during the 13-game win streak when everything was hunky-dory and we're all having a great time. Like, yes, Jackson Kohler, he has improved. He's a great rebounder. Carson Cooper, he's taken a little step forward. Jamon Sapala, especially earlier in the year, not as of late, that seemed to be an upgrade at the center position. This position has upgraded from last year, but is it at a level where you can win championships, that you could be above average in the front court? Like, there's no good way to say this without sounding like I'm dogging the kid. But the fact that Carson Cooper is your number one option at the center position because of what he offers defensively, and he does have good stretches defensively, but it's not all the time. The fact that is your 1A option at center and no one else because, well, Zapala isn't quick enough laterally. Jackson Kohler, as good as he is, he's still an undersized center at the end of the day. Like, that could undo this team. They're also not that great on the offensive end, too, collectively as a front court. So, you know the issues I have with the front court. If you don't have the same issues, I just don't know what to tell you. But what else was concerning, and this is something we haven't actually talked about a lot here, and it's the class of 2023. That was a horrific performance from them. And, of course, I'm going to narrow it down to two guys. We're going to talk about the Burger Boys, McDonald's All-Americans. Xavier Booker looked like that was literally the first time in his entire life that he has seen a zone defense be played in front of him. He looked like a deer caught in the headlights. And his running mate, Jeremy Fears, I love the kid. I think he's going to be a great point guard one day. He really had a strong start to the year. He clearly not great. He also equally seemed like he never saw his zone defense for the first time. And what really befuddles me about Fears is that at one point this season, he was ratcheting up the aggressiveness to the hoop, taking the ball to the lane. And I know that's a little difficult with the zone. Like, that's the whole point of the zone, so you don't get to slash down the middle. But you do have the ability to shoot. Like, you are a 40% shooter from three. And I'm not saying he should jack up 7 threes in a game, but it is clear that he does have shooting capabilities, whether it's from the elbow, the three. Just a little bit more aggression than just 2 shots taken in this game from Jeremy Fears. That just can't happen. We can't have Tum Tum Nairn being the starting point guard again for this offense. Like, we need someone that is actually a threat to score. I thought that's what he was. I thought that's what he was starting to become as we went December into January. But a performance like this with just, again, 0 of 2 shooting, who's that going to scare? So now the cat's out of the bag on Michigan State. And yes, it is that simple. We don't have to overcomplicate this. Just run some zone against MSU. That's it. They clearly seem like they don't know what to do. They don't have an answer. I thought maybe it could be Frankie Fiddler. He was a little more veteran than Xavier Booker, who truly had no idea what to do with the ball when it was handed to him. But even that, far and few between moments that, you really felt like the offense was clicking. So that's it. And I guess, if you still want to lie to yourself and say that, hey, this Michigan State team is still in the Big Ten chase, sure, yeah, I suppose there's 5 games left in the season and it can go fine. One issue with that is who's coming up. It's Illinois, it's Purdue, it's Maryland, it's Michigan. And then it's it doesn't actually matter who it is and in what order because, look, the Illinois game this upcoming weekend, that's their Super Bowl. Like, they want what they lost here in East Lansing. Like, if they're going to leave us something in this regular season, it's at least a win against Michigan State and Tom Izzo, who they absolutely despise. Okay, Michigan, you got 2 games against them, and the Purdue game too. It's not just that they're good teams; it's where they're good. What do you think 7-footer Vlad Golden on Michigan is going to do to this front court? Okay, what do you think TKR on Purdue is going to do to this front court? It's not just the fact that, we lost the game, we can't shoot well. It's specifically where one of the warts is, and it's the front court. Michigan State, not only did they not play great teams to start the season, they didn't play good front courts to start the season. And now down the home stretch, that's what you have coming down the pike. So, good luck. Good luck. It's, I guess better to rip the Band-Aid off now for the Big Ten chase than ever. But, yeah, I hate to be, mopey. I don't think we have been after any of the 4 losses leading into this one. But, yeah, there was so much at stake for Michigan State here. And there's literally nothing at stake for Indiana. And this can't even be like, they're playing with house money sort of thing. No, they've already spent all their house money, on their contract buyout for Mike Woodson, for their NIL collective, for this roster that has gone nowhere. And yet they've still won the game at home. It's actually, I was going to say unbelievable, but is it? MSU always seems to lose a game like this where they're double-digit favorites at home. But, oh well. I'm sure March Madness will go great. We'll just got to hope that MSU gets a draw that has no good front court players and that doesn't have a television to watch film on, so they know not to run zone against the Michigan State Spartans. We will be back here. We're going to talk football because all set with basketball for today. We're going to, talk about WayFair, though, guys, because after the holiday hustle, there's nothing like giving your home a little TLC. I always find that decluttering and refreshing my space helps me get back into a routine. Whether you're tidying up, clearing out, or just want to give your space a new look to start the year, WayFair has everything you need, all within your budget. Now, right now, I'm currently looking for anyone that could run an offense against the zone, but WayFair has everything but that. No, they just, deal with storage and furniture options, which, hey, you know what? With a small house, I got 2 kids, we have a lot of crap in our house. WayFair is going to help store that for us. And, best of all, guys, there's something for every style in every home, and they make it free with their hassle-free delivery, even for the larger items. WayFair's site is easy to navigate, and I found everything I needed in no time. Give your home the refresh it needs with WayFair. Head to wayfair.com. Right now, that is WayFair.com. WayFair, every style, every home. My skin is getting a little itchy. I was starting to break out in hives last night, and actually I couldn't even go through the whole night without sweating. And I realized why. It's because we've gone so long without talking about the offensive line and the portal cycle, getting Connor Moore. Guys, that is the best portal addition, arguably, that you could have in this offseason. Now, the arguably part, I think the other guy that gives good competition, Matt Golban, another offensive lineman, transferred from Wake Forest, did really well at another Power 4 level, but want to put the microscope on Connor Moore here for a little bit because, well, unlike Matt Golban, he hails in from Montana State. Little different playing ACC Power 4 football and FCS football, even at a nearly championship level. Montana State, they fell in the FCS championship game to North Dakota State, but I remember an interview. And don't ask me to remember the player or what platform. I'm only good for so much here, but it was something along the lines of, you know what, there really isn't that much separation between FCS and FBS football when it comes to skill position players. That's what that one player was claiming. And he said the big difference lies in the trenches, defensive linemen, offensive linemen. So I do wonder if there's going to be a big jump, maybe too big of a jump for Connor Moore. So let's actually look at some numbers here. Let's look at some other peers that have gone from lower level football, like FCS or Group of 5 football, to Power 4 football last year, and even a year before that. I got some examples. So, class, let's look at what Connor Moore did last year over at Montana State. Why was this kid so highly sought after in the portal? Cincinnati really wanted him. Ohio State was going to have him on for a visit. There was an offer from an SEC school that, hey, you know what? We're going to pay you a really good amount if you come visit and commit to us. But, hey, when you visit Michigan State, apparently that's going to squash everything down. So why was he so highly sought after? Well, Connor Moore, last year in the regular season at Montana State, playing left tackle, 6 pressures given up, just 1 sack on the regular season. That's not good. That's not great. Well, that's elite. That's how you get on an FCS All-American list. That's how you go into the portal and have pretty much everyone wanting your services on the team. Now, that was a regular season, I said. 6 pressures, 1 sack in the regular season against other FCS schools, many below the level of play that Montana State was doing. Now, in 4 FCS playoff games, he allowed 5 pressures. Now, here's where it gets a little dicey because those weren't spread out across all 4 playoff games. All 5 came against the same team, North Dakota State. Obviously, the best team that Montana State would have played that year. And I actually went back and I watched the highlights. I didn't see 5 pressures given up, but I'd be lying to you if I said that, hey, he didn't have some moments where he was just rushed right over. Okay? So that's where I start to wonder, oh, man, 1 game sample size. I'm not here freaking out right now, but I do wonder, how big will the jump be from FCS to FBS football or any other lower levels? So what I did, I went last year to look at the transfer portal, guys that were at lower levels that bumped up to Power 4. Right now, okay, just top to bottom, some of the top guys in the class, just like Connor Moore, one of the top guys from FCS going to FBS this year. Hey, maybe these will give us some clarity, maybe some confidence in Connor Moore. And I think that, the numbers will show you that
Yeah, we can expect at least a decent floor for Connor Moore. So Easton Kilty, he was a 4-star transfer rated going from North Dakota to Kansas State last year. All that he did pretty well for the Wildcats. He graded north of 80 on Pro Football Focus if you take their numbers for anything. But here are some actual quantifiable numbers. He allowed just 9 pressures and 1 sack last year, going from FCS to Big 12 football. Okay, not bad for Mr. Easton Kilty. JC Davis. Now, this isn't FCS to Illinois, but he went from New Mexico, group of 5, to Illinois. He allowed 16 pressures, 1 sack over for the Illini. That's not terrible. That's probably fine. That's probably numbers that you would take. Jonathan Mendoza, he was a 3-star rated transfer that went from Yale to Louisville last year. He graded a 69 on Pro Football Focus, so just okay. 18 pressures and 2 sacks allowed. Now, I will say this. Louisville obviously plays in the ACC. 18 pressures on the whole season isn't great, but 12 of them combined were against Miami and SMU, 2 of the best pass rushes that you'll find, not just in the ACC, but also Power 4 football. So that's to say that, hey, the other 10 games, they did pretty good. He only let up 6 pressures. So, hey, when he's playing against average ACC, average Power 4 level football, he held his own. It was just when he got against the top flight guys. Now, Fernando Carmona is the last guy that we'll use as an example from last year. San Jose State over to Arkansas, 22 pressures allowed, 5 sacks. Kind of a tough-ish season for Fernando Carmona. So, again, that's not to say it's automatically he's going to play like these guys, Easton Kilty, but just taking examples of other lower-level football, jumping to FBS at the offensive tackle position, I think there's reason to believe that Connor Moore will at least have a floor of an average offensive lineman. Okay, that's probably worst case scenario. And that's going to be a big jump up from where we were last year, guys. I've said the stat a few times. We also seen it with our eyeballs. But from the right tackle position last year, Aiden Childs saw north of 30 pressures. That was amongst the highest. I don't even think it was Power 4 football, just FBS football in general. So if we're going just to, hey, Connor Moore, I know we have sky-high expectations from you. I know that, hey, we want you to be like a third-team All-Big Ten player, second-team All-Big Ten lineman. But even if he was just average, I think that's going to be a nice, sizable bump up from where Aiden Childs was last year from the right tackle position. Now, just to pull off a few more guys from the FCS level that made a jump to FBS. In 2023, Johnny Cornelius, he went from Rhode Island to Oregon. Okay, in the 2023 season, graded out as an 80, allowed just 11 pressures, 0 sacks. Now, last year, 18 pressures and 2 sacks. Now, that, of course, is with some extra games, like the Big Ten Championship, college football playoff. He graded out as a 78.8. So, hey, that's a guy from FCS that made a good jump to FBS. The last guy that we're going to use, Gottlieb Ayodz. There's no way I'm saying that name right. I'm very sorry, but he went from Frostburg State to Maryland in 2023. That's not even FCS. That's Division II going to Maryland. And guys, he played really well for the Terrapins 2 years ago. 14 pressures, 0 sacks allowed in 10 games of work. So it can happen. You can make a jump from FCS to FBS and still be immediately an instant contributor. If not, hey, a little more than that, a plus guy. So he's not the only guy. And when I say Connor Moore isn't the only guy going from FCS to Michigan State on the offensive line. Caleb Carter from Western Carolina, he also, is making the jump from FCS to Michigan State. Now, the reason we haven't talked about him so much, there's just less fanfare around Caleb Carter. And what you're getting out of him is a guy that is, to say he's versatile would be an understatement here. He played every position. Actually, no, he didn't even play every position at Western Carolina last year. He started games at every position but left guard last year. So this young man, certainly well-rounded. Now, he graded out on Pro Football Focus in the pass protection with a 63.4. That's saying a tick below average, of course. But hey, you know what? He was kind of all over the map last year. He had 4 games where he was graded above an 80. He had 3 games where he was graded below a 50. So it was really up and down for Caleb Carter. But bottom line, you're getting a guy with 4 years of college football experience, a guy that has well over 1,000 snaps played, and he has played everywhere on that offensive line. So we expect Connor Moore. Everyone expects Connor Moore. He didn't come to Michigan State to sit the bench. He will be your starting right tackle. Injuries, just hopefully don't happen in the offseason. But with Caleb Carter, more of a depth guy there, coming in with less fanfare, lower Pro Football Focus scores, but hey, a guy that has experience. all over the map. So right now, your offensive line, left tackle, Stanton Ramble, who I still have high hopes for, former 4-star, had that big injury his freshman season and played decent enough as a redshirt freshman. I think there's a lot of growth for him. At center, Matt Goldman, just like we talked about. Now, the other two guard positions, that's where it gets fascinating, right? I mean, Gavin Brocious, Christian Phillips, two guys that show good things last year in a very small window before they suffered season-ending injuries. You also have Rakeem Johnson, who played decent enough as a true freshman. Caleb Carter, who we just mentioned, could he get in the mix for a starting position? Who am I to say? And then will we ever hear Cole Dellinger's name? Former 4-star. Is this the year that he finally makes that leap up? So, hey, guys, it's been a while since we talked offensive line. I know it's not like the sexiest conversation topic, but yeah, that's something that we're going to keep checking in and out of here throughout the offseason because that was the story of last year on the offensive side of the ball mainly. And it's not to say that they were the only reason Michigan State missed a bowl game, but yeah, big microscope over those guys. Now, speaking of microscope, let's get into a mailbag question, lockedonspartans@gmail.com. This comes from our guy, Craig, who writes in short, concise questions, straight to the point. Which assistants are on the hot seat next fall? So, you know what? Let's just not pin it to one guy. Let's actually rank all 11 coaches. And not to, who's most likely to get fired, but the way we'll spin this a little bit, sorry, Craig, if this goes away from your question a little bit, is who's under the most pressure next year? As an assistant coach, we're going to go 11-1 because there's no longer that cap of 10 assistant coaches now in college football. You can hire as many as you want realistically. So of the 11 position guys, well, let's just break it down. Right now, 11, Courtney Hawkins, your receivers coach. I think the receivers aren't the issue. Obviously, Nick Marsh, a really strong season. So Courtney Hawkins, especially as an alum of the program, not under a ton of pressure next season. Now, the next two guys, 10 and 9, I'm going to go with the new guys. James Adams from Wake Forest. He'll be your safeties coach. John Boyer, your quarterback's coach. Now, that's not to say like they have no pressure whatsoever. Like we're going to need to see some elevated quarterback play. And John Boyer, I mean, that's not a guy that, hey, you got from a Midwest program to bolster your recruiting ties around here. No, that's another guy taken from Oregon State. So how many guys from that program can you take? Well, they're pushing it to the limit. Let's make sure that we're getting some productivity out of guys from Corvallis here. Number 8, Blue Adams. That's another secondary coach. 7, Brian Wozniak, tight ends coach. And this is where we're going to start getting into, we're going to need to see some production next fall because, hey, Jack Vallian brought in the leader of touchdown catches at the tight end position. And, he didn't have one until the final game against Rutgers. And it was kind of just a season from Vallian all year. Also from Brendan Parachek, a guy that we had high hopes for going into last season. You get both of those guys back. You get Michael Masunas back. Can we finally just stop talking about when we will see tight end production and actually start seeing it at an elevated level? It's just been fine at best since 2015 with Josiah Price. We need to see more tight end production here. Number 6, Keith Banafa, your running backs coach. They're kind of really going for it here, aren't they? I mean, yeah, you got Mekhi Frazier, Brandon Tulis, two guys, true freshmen. They barely got any run last year. And all they did in the transfer portal, Eli Tolliver, who split some carries over at Sacramento State. You're really saying to the world that, yeah, we trust our 2 true freshmen. Yes, we trust our eyeballs with what we see over at Sacramento State because I like to think that MSU maybe could have done a little better optic-wise in the portal, but hey, you know what? What do I know? You guys are the ones in the room. You guys are the one coaching these guys. Prove me wrong. Make sure we have a good running back next year. Number 5, Jim Maholchek, your offensive line coach, and he's one of the coaches that nationwide is just raved about, right? You hear no bad things about Jim Maholchek. He knows how to produce. He knows how to develop. You got to see it this year. And last year, plenty of excuses to be made. We made all the excuses for the offensive line. They came into the season with no depth, and you had to carve into that lack of depth very early on in the season. But hey, no lack of depth this year. A lot of your young guys got some run. Let's see what year 2 of offensive lineman development can look like here because it has to develop in order for this offense to do anything. Number 4, and number 3, we'll just kind of group them into one thing. It's Coach Sui Noah and then Chad Wilt, your rush ends coach and your defensive line coach too. Literally a historically bad performance last year. What was it? 6 games without a sack that set an FBS record in the last 20 years. Gonna need to see not that this year. So let's coach the guys up. Jalen Thompson's got to get a little better. David Santiago, the guy that you got from Air Force. Anelu Lafayette, the guy that you got from Wisconsin. We need to see a pass rush this year. We don't need to go in the X's and O's of why that's important in the game of football. If you didn't understand why it's not after last year, I just don't know what to tell you. And we got to save our last two under the most pressure. Well, for the coordinators, the guys that are like at the top of the food chain right here, right? I mean, Joe Rossi, I guess, will be number two because number one, Brian Lindgren, I think, is under the most pressure next year because, well, he's the guy that doesn't really have a lot of excuses. Like, you have the offensive line depth we just talked about. I think last year in your backups, you had one guy that had any college experience, and that was Dallas Fincher. Okay, now this year, your backups, like your guys in the 2 deep and the 3 deep, I think there's 7 guys that will have any college experience. It's going to look good for the offensive line as far as depth goes. We talked about, I guess, and a lot of you guys have talked about this too. We feel like the wide receiver group has been elevated from last year. You kept Nick Marsh, which was a massive, massive retainment in this portal cycle. Let's not act like he wasn't tampered with to oblivion. And also surrounding him with guys like Christian McCray, someone that could be a pure slot receiver, something that was missing last year. You also got Amari Kelly, who produced at a lower level. But hey, you know what? You're going to get a veteran guy in here to bolster around Nick Marsh, Christian McCray. It's got to happen. And like, it's not to say, you're breaking in a new quarterback. You absolutely have the guy that you want making his leap from sophomore to junior year. We have to see elevated offensive play, and there really are no excuses for the offense this year. And that includes the offensive coordinator. Like, you have your quarterback. You have an offensive line that should at least be average. You have weapons at the receiver room. The running back crew, prove me wrong. Tell me why you got an FCS running back and are keeping 2 true freshmen from last year, and why you didn't go for anyone that was a bigger name or came from a bigger program or that had more production at a bigger level. Please. Like, actually prove me wrong. I want to be proven wrong here. So those are the guys. We're going to end it on here. This is a fun question from Diggs. Again, lockedonspartans@gmail.com. What game are you looking forward to the most on vibes alone for next fall? Like, now we got to read that carefully. Vibes alone. So I'm not gonna say any, like, the Michigan game. Like, that's not like a fun vibey game. No, that's war. That's battle. That is wake up with a pit in your stomach and you want to throw up until the ball's kicked off. I don't have high vibes against Michigan ever, really. We're also going to nix road games too, because when I think good vibes, I think home games. I think Spartan Stadium. I think warm weather. I think that, hey, you know what? There is a belief in this team still. So early on in the season, while the boys are still hopefully undefeated, but I still want like an aspect of competitiveness. Dare I say, some revenge from last year. That's right. Chestnut Hill did not like the way that game ended. I still think Michigan State was the better team than Boston College, but that's not what the final score said. So let's make it right this time. Week 2, September 6th. Hopefully that means the weather's still good. Spartan Stadium still getting full. Even more important to the vibes, the tailgating lots are full. This is going to tell us a lot about what we can expect of the team next season. Week 2 against Boston College. As far as vibes go, that's what I'm looking forward to the most. It's winnable. It's really going to tell you a lot about this team. And hey, it's always a good time in East Lansing in early September. Oh, I can't wait. God, how long? 8 months? 7? 9? Anywhere between 6 and 10 months. I just am not in the brain space to do the math right now on a calendar, but can't get here soon enough, guys. All right. You guys already know this by now. Any questions ever, lockedonspartans@gmail.com. We will be back on tomorrow's show because, it's Locked On Spartans. We do this 5 days a week. Now take care of yourselves. Love you all. Go Green.